afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Getting In, a College Coach Conversation. It feels like it's been forever since I hosted the show. But the good news, I guess, if you've missed me, is that I am hosting, I think, all of our shows in October or close to all of them. So I'm excited to be back with you all. I will tell you that I am recording from what is something of a construction zone, which is the house that I've been waiting to move into for far longer than I thought I was going to be waiting to, and we probably shouldn't be here yet, but we are. So if you hear any hammers banging, I apologize in advance. But really quick public service message. If you have time and you like this podcast, please shoot us a review on Apple Podcasts. It helps other people to find us. The more reviews we have, the higher we rise, so that it makes it possible for people who have never heard of the show before to find the show. We have, as we always do, a great show for you today. We are going to be talking about net price calculators and how those can be incredibly valuable and important to your college process. We're also going to be talking about colleges that have some atypical deadlines or maybe some other quirks or anomalies in their process that we wanted you to be aware of. But before we get to that, I am super excited to welcome Chris Perlongo, who is Associate Director of Admissions at the University of Vermont. Welcome, Chris.
Awesome. Thanks, Beth. Great to be here. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us this afternoon.
Chris, I noted this to you in an email, but I am particularly excited to welcome you to the show because I have spent quite a bit of time in Burlington. That lovely picture that's behind you. My stepson graduated from UVM in 2019 and actually stayed on for an extra year to get his graduate degree. We are a big UVM family, very big fans of the school. It was a really great fit for him. I am wearing my own son's college gear here. He was not willing to consider UVM. He didn't, something about going a little too far north for him, but I would have been a big fan if he'd decided to go there. Really quickly, I want to give an opportunity for you to just tell us a little bit more about UVM. I mean, what I just shared is lovely, but it's not really telling anybody anything about the institution.
That actually did my job for me. I usually start these presentations by just turning around and pointing to the picture behind me, and that's pretty much Burlington and UVM. It speaks for itself. It actually looks like that this time of year. Fall is in full swing up here in Burlington. Leaves are changing. It is quintessential New England, and it's an amazing place. So yes, as a transplanted New Yorker, I'm from New York City, born and raised. I've been in Burlington about 7 years now myself. I'm in higher education much longer. I'm happy to speak about UVM, and frankly, a place where I believe in and is a wonderful place to live, not just a member as a student, but also as a community too. And just a real quick elevator speech on us. We are located in Burlington, Vermont, as mentioned. Depending where you're coming from, various ways to get here. We have Burlington International Airport about 3 miles from campus, with direct flights out of most major cities, usually not a far drive. And now if you're coming from the New York City area, we offer train service directly to Burlington as well for folks coming from the tri-state. So plenty of ways to get here also. We're about 10,000 undergraduates at UVM. Roughly class size for us is about 30 to 32 students, student faculty ratio about 16:1. We are most different from most other state flagships in the sense that our population actually draws mostly from out of state. About 77% of my students will come from outside the state of Vermont, increasingly outside of New England. We actually had one of our biggest classes in our history this past year, and more than half of the students came from outside New England proper. Yeah, it's exciting. We are seeing that in Vermonters. Don't get me wrong, we love you too. There are plenty of spaces for you, just that we don't have as many Vermonters in the state. So we are increasingly drawing from out of state. But last year's class, as mentioned, one of our record ones came from 48 different states and over 17 different countries. So again, lots of time of change at UVM, over 7 different schools and an honors college. And again, located in this idealistic setting where the best of both worlds is very cliche in my book, but you really can't have it at UVM. I feel like you could have the academic experience with this beautiful backdrop right on your doorstep.
Yeah, I mean, the location really can't be beat unless you are like my son and you thought that it was maybe a tad too cold. But even in northern New England, to me, it's not so crazy cold because you do have the lake right there. And so I'm a fan. I don't want to be seen as we don't push any particular college on this podcast. So, this is not going to be right for everyone, but it's certainly worth a look. And I particularly like that it has that kind of private school feel, even though it is a public institution, and that's always kind of cool. One thing for me, adding to that private school feel, is a new addition to your admissions process this year, and that is early decision. So for our listeners, early decision is binding, right? You apply by an early deadline, typically around November 1st. You're going to hear usually by mid-December. And if you get accepted, you agree to withdraw all of your other applications and commit to that institution. So I'm curious about the decision to add early decision, which is a little less typical for a public school.
Sure, no, and it really comes by, it's going to sound basic to say it, but demand. UVM is in a nice place in the sense that the last 3 to 4 years, we see substantial application increase. This past year, we had over 30,000 applicants to the university. And what's nice about that is that we are seeing more and more applicants from over the world and more different identities and more different socioeconomic sets. And as we're hearing students who are applying to UVM from different parts of the world, we've heard the last few years that, if you guys had early decision, I would have applied early decision. So after 2, 3, 4 years of hearing that, and then seeing our applications continue to rise, particularly with early action, where almost 2/3 of our 30,000 applications came in last year, we decided to give early decision a chance. Now, of course, we're going to see how the next few years play out, and we're not expecting a huge early decision class this year, although our numbers are running quite well so far early into this application season. But at the same time, I'm also really doing due service in saying that to dispel the notion that we're going to become that much more selective around early action and regular decision. I work with access families here at UVM, and I think it's important that everybody has an equal opportunity to be considered for the institution. So early decision is just one of many options, but that kind of went to the calculus of why to pick early decision and why it might be an option for some students, because frankly, we've heard it for the last few years.
So do you anticipate that, do you, and you may not be able to share this and you may not know, but are you going to try and keep it to a certain percentage of the entering class coming in through early decision? One of the things we are seeing are some schools out there filling, 50, 60, 80% of the class in early decision. That's a little scary. Any sense of what you anticipate?
Scary for me too. It changes my whole reading dynamic. I'm on my team. But no, I think having done this at a previous institution I was affiliated with, the first year we offered both early action and early decision. We didn't see a huge application class. We saw some, don't get me wrong. We had a fair amount of students apply, but it takes a few years to build that momentum, in my opinion. And who knows? Every year is different. I should couch this conversation by saying, students are applying different ways, especially post-pandemic. We're seeing patterns in higher education and application process change. But we don't expect it to be a huge windfall this first year out. And again, really emphasizing the point that for early action and regular decision, well, more early action and regular, and we'll talk about that, are very viable options at UVM. And while we are looking to capitalize on as many students who do apply to the university and give them the opportunity to attend early decision, we're only going to do so if it's the right fit for the institution academically, socially, personally, et cetera.
Right. That's what I always tell students is that early decision is really nice and it gives you an advantage if you're already a competitive applicant. But if you are not competitive, early decision doesn't automatically make you so. And it sounds like philosophically, we're aligned on that front. So that's always good.
No, absolutely. It has to be the right fit, and I just got back from a New York City recruiting trip, and I really emphasize that early decision, apply for the right reasons. It's your number one school. You want to be there. If it applies, you've done your financial homework. You mentioned net price calculator at the beginning of this conversation. Make sure you do your due diligence before applying to any school early decision, because, and again, not to assume it's a binding agreement. You're telling you're at school, it's your number one choice. If I get in, I'm attending. You want to make sure you have your financial considerations also factored into that work as well. So it is an option. It's not the only option. And again, I do think early action is something that is to be considered as schools get more and more competitive, particularly in UVM's peer and aspirant set. So early action is something that I would advocate for, because again, it is non-binding. You still find out your decision earlier, but you have some space until May 1st to make that decision. Regular is still an option, but for some programs, it is getting very competitive.
Right. So actually, to that point, it is important to note here, at a lot of schools where they offer early decision, it's early decision and regular decision. At some schools, it's early action or regular decision. At UVM and a couple of other schools that are out there, you're actually going to continue offering both. So what I'm hearing from you is if you really are interested in UVM, you don't necessarily have to sign a binding agreement, but you certainly should get it in by that early deadline if you can.
Yes, I would say so. And again, to put numbers behind stats, I think that's the best ideas are construed using data, and we're in the same boat. I feel like among UVM's 30,000 applications last year, almost 20,000, that's almost 2/3 of the class, came in early action. So again, for students, I would emphasize, particularly some of our programs that do have capped enrollment in terms of space in their class, early action is a path that if UVM is among your top few choices for attendance, you will want to consider in terms of early action. And early decision, I don't mean to dissuade students from doing it. It's a great option. And
Hmm.
fact is, even though we don't have numbers, it's our first year, it will be easier to get in. I mean, I think that's pretty standard. I've read for some very selective institutions, some not
Hmm.
so much, and some in between. And you're making a binding commitment. That matters to the admissions committee, right? So I think no matter what institution, if you're going early decision, that number you gave before about admitting the class, that percentage is fair. And some schools will do that. Again, UVM is not quite there yet, I don't think. We're not going to see a few years, but at the same time, it has to be the right decision for the right reasons.
Right. And then all that makes sense. Really quickly, you mentioned there are some programs that are capped or that, by the time you apply in regular decision may be filled. Can you throw out a couple of those for us?
Sure, UVM historically, our nursing program, anything with
Yeah.
pre-medical at UVM has been competitive because we're only one of a handful of institutions in the country that has a full level one trauma hospital right on campus. It's not a car or a subway or a train right away. It's right across the quad. So our students can come here and take coursework and just walk across the campus and get right where they need to be. That's been appealing. And it's UVM Medical Center. It's the largest hospital north of Boston. So for our medical students, anything from nursing to exercise science, with capped enrollment spaces, you definitely want to try to get your information in the first wave of applicants. I would
Right.
say increasingly anything environmental sciences as well. UVM has a commitment to
Interesting.
sustainability, the beautiful environment behind me. I emphasize with my skiers and my people who want to get on a Lake Champlain, if we're going to enjoy this beautiful playground that we have to make sure we keep it this way. And that goes to taking care of our environment, responsible agriculture, sustainability, and any students who are applying to those programs, we've seen from all over the world, frankly, a really piqued interest. And some of these programs have lab spaces, which means we can only admit so many to make
Yeah.
sure that the academic quality stays the same of the experience for the student. So those are just a few. There are many more as we're, again, seeing increases in applications record numbers, but those are a couple that worth mentioning.
Got it. Okay. That's really helpful. Thank you. Uh, okay. Last big question I have for you is around your supplemental essay, which is optional. And I've been paying attention because, like I said, my stepson just graduated and back in 2019. He did not have to write an essay. For many years, Vermont did not require anything additional. But a couple of years ago, you introduced this optional essay. I am not a huge fan of the optional piece because, in my work, we deal with a lot of the stress and anxiety that families and students have around, well, what does it mean when it's optional? So I would love to hear from you on, who should write this and kind of the thinking behind making it optional.
Sure, happy to do so. And I should point out every institution I've been affiliated with has had an optional essay, but I
Is
point
it
that out
you?
because oh no, I say exactly right. Every one of them. But I point that out to say I give the same answer for the last 20 some odd years in the sense that we talk a lot in admissions about stats and numbers and acceptance rates. You just heard about, early decision acceptance rates. A big part of this world is holistic review, right? And I don't mean
Mhm.
to dispel the notion that transcripts drive the conversation at every school I've been at. Testing, a lot of schools are test optional now. That's probably a whole different webinar conversation. But for the optional essay, it's the only time outside of the personal statement that I get to hear the student's voice, right?
Yep.
Recommendation letters are somebody else. Transcript only tells the numbers or the letters. Testing is debatable across the board. The optional essay gives me that much more insight into who you are as a person. And we'd be complete hypocrites to say, we're looking to diversify our class and bring to our community and shape our campus, and then not look at your spoken word, right? So
Right.
for
Yep.
us, the personal essay is a general essay in most cases that applies to any institution you're writing to, and that's important. We read it and
Hmm.
we do want to hear your story no matter what it is. The optional essay gives us that much more information about why our school, right? And at
Right.
UVM, we have 5 prompts. There's the why UVM essay, there's the constructive discourse, the builder essay, and the one that's gotten national press the last couple of years, the Ben and Jerry's essay, where
Right.
we ask students to name a flavor of Ben and Jerry's, real or imagined, that best describes who they are. And we've gotten really positive feedback that while it is another essay, I don't mean to discount that, it's a paragraph, not a full one. It gives students a chance to say, here's why UVM, here's why me, here's why there's a match. And I think that was a creative way to do that. So my advice on the optional essay is to, frankly, do it. I think it's really
Yeah.
important. They are optional technically, but I can't tell you how disappointing it is to read a great application and you get to that space where a student has one more way to show their interest in your institution, and it's blank.
Yeah.
So I would highly emphasize for any school of UVM selectivity or above to do that optional essay, but have fun with it. It's not meant to be trickery. We're not we're not accounting for which one you choose. We have 5 options. Just do one, don't do all 5. And it doesn't matter to us which one you do. It's totally up to you. But again, it's just a way to learn more about you. So hopefully that takes some of the angst out of it. I know it's easy for me to say as the reader, not the writer, but I do think it's important to have a little fun with it and just tell us who you are. That's all we're
Yeah.
looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think you're underscoring what I generally say, which is if you really are interested in going to this school, if they have an optional essay, you really should be writing it. So, to all our listeners out there, in case you weren't totally getting what Chris was saying, you really need to write this essay. Um,
Very true. Very
I
true.
could think of maybe a handful of circumstances under which it would not be such a big deal, but it probably doesn't apply to you listeners. So therefore, write the essay. We have 1 minute, and in that minute, I did want to ask. Let's talk about that Ben and Jerry's essay. What? It's a fun essay, like you say. It's been gotten a lot of press. Any tips or advice you have for students who are going to work on that essay?
The 30 seconds or less that we have. No,
Yes.
I think, as mentioned, like I said, just try to be yourself, but don't try to overextend yourself either. I find some students who try to show me something different, and I've been reading thousands of applications for 21 years, right? And many admissions counselors, we all come from different identities, different backgrounds, different experiences. So I think that optional essay, whether it's Ben and Jerry's or others, just try to give your creative side, try to show your personal side, and a little bit of who you are, because that's ultimately what we're looking for. Like, a lot of us can't offer interviews. We get 30,000 apps. We can't be equitable by meeting every single one. So that
Yep.
optional essay is a good way to tell us your story. So I think for us, if it's Ben and Jerry's, whether it's New York Super Chunk, or it's Half Baked, or it's Fish Food, or it's Glenfire Trail Mix, or all the ones we've met, were some of the really creative ones that we've seen, where one student wrote an essay about "Don't Not Deny Me" was her essay title. I thought that was
That's
great.
cute.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think we have a little fun with it, but know that the essay usually just confirms what we're thinking on the application, not something that's going to usually make or break you. So again, at the same time, we just want to learn more about you. And if you want to be creative and have some fun with it, that's what we're hoping for.
Awesome. And thank you for underscoring that as well, because I often tell my kids, this doesn't have to be so serious all the time. You don't have to always be in pure academic mode. As an admissions officer, as a former admissions officer, I just trying to get to know the student in the file. And if you show some personality, that helps with that. So I
Yeah.
appreciate it. I like, for what it's worth, I don't love that it's optional, but I like your question. So, it's a 50-50 for me. So on
Well, we
that
hope
front.
that helps. Yeah, because again, I think a typical question I get at UVM is, what's a typical UVM student? And there is no atypical UVM student, but our students, I think, overall find a pretty even keel between focusing on doing amazing things in the classroom, but also doing amazing things on campus as well. And I feel like those optional essays are a chance to express that. Like, I'm looking to just grow and excel and achieve and just become my true self in a
Right.
variety of spaces too. So hopefully that essay gives folks a chance to do that no matter which one they choose.
Absolutely. Chris, thank you so much for joining the show today. I really appreciate it.
Oh, Beth, it was a pleasure. I wish everyone the best of luck. Reach out to your admissions counselors, and that's probably my biggest advice, is don't be afraid to ask questions. It's a very complex process, constantly changing, even for us who are on this side of it. Don't be afraid to reach out. It's frankly the favorite part of our job. So I wish you
Yeah,
the best of luck, and you're going to wind up somewhere great, no matter where that is.
that's for sure.